we get some interesting things that a lot of people don't think about when you have that much differential in temperature. When you have, for instance, fixed deck bridges off the end of curves, uh, our curves breathe, for lack of a better term. They'll slide in and out an inch or two or more. Well, if you got a fixed deck bridge off the end of that, your bridge wasn't designed to do that. And we've got 2 or 3 bridges right now. In one case, the bridge isn't that old, but we've got issues with it going out of class, and there's a lot of work on that abutment just because the track's trying to move and the bridge doesn't want to let it. And so we've got to do some different thinking about some of our bridge replacements.
You may know the American Railway Engineering and Maintenance of Way Association, or AREMA, as the, quote, keepers of the manuals. You may know them as the, quote, people behind the largest annual railroad conference in North America. Heck, you may not know about AREMA at all. This podcast is designed, no pun intended, to change your view of who AREMA is and how AREMA has changed the trajectory of many railway careers over its 100-plus year history. Welcome to Platform Chats with your host, Walt Bleser, where he takes a moment to discuss the impacts AREMA has had on the very people who are proud to be called members. Are you ready to roll with AREMA?
ARE Corporation is a proud supporter of AREMA and Platform Chats. If you are looking to take your railway structures career to the next level, or simply start it down the right track, please visit us at arecorp.com. Please see our brand new job postings on our careers page or on our LinkedIn page.
Hello, everybody, and welcome back to AREMA's Platform Chats. Believe it or not, it has been a minute because we are on episode 10. We're actually into the double digits, and I can't believe it. I remember when we did the very first one last January and had no idea where this is going to go. It is now, I'm approaching the Thanksgiving week at the time we're recording this. It'll be dropped in December, but we are definitely heading towards the holidays in a fast and furious manner. No big updates this week on the top railway industry podcasts. I know this is one of the main reasons you listen is you want to know where it is the Platform Chats on the old charts. We're still hovering there at 11. I'm going to go ahead and blame the fact that they haven't updated their metrics because I did get the fantastic news that we hit the 2,000 download mark on the platform that we use to push this podcast to the interwebs and wherever you are downloading your podcast. So 2,000 in the first year, and the first year's not over, is very exciting for AREMA. It's very exciting for me. I'm just so excited people are willing to take the time and listen to these podcasts. And I just hope everyone knows that we're doing our absolute best to create content for you that is interesting, exciting, and makes you want to come back. And there is no better transition than my next guest is Brian Lindamood with the Alaska Railroad. And the thought behind today's podcast, or this podcast, is that we're going to talk about all things winter prep. Yes, Brian is a past president of AREMA. Yes, Brian's a big AREMA supporter. Absolutely. But my goal is for Brian to tell us more about the Alaska Railroad, its humble beginnings to where it is now, and really talk quite a bit on any kind of fun stories he may have as it relates to winter prep, avalanche mitigation, frankly, anything you can probably imagine since we are talking about Alaska. So with that, Brian, I would love it if you would go ahead and give our guests a kind of a background on how in the world you landed into the industry, how you landed in Alaska, and frankly, I guess would like to hear a little bit about your AREMA involvement as well. So just tell us whatever it is it's you want to tell us.
Okay. Well, I guess, as you sort of alluded to, some people find themselves in the industry, and there's those of us that actually sought out the industry. When I was in high school, I got interested in the railroad industry and was really interested in how to get in it. This was back in the 80s, before the internet was really widely available. And so working with the guidance counselor and stuff like that, I really didn't know what I wanted to do. I had my thoughts on operations and telling trains where to go and, whatever you think that does. Um, and sort of found 3 or 4 different schools uh, that had programs that more importantly, that the railroads were hiring out of. In the 80s, it was the middle of the Staggers Act adjustment, where they were cutting staff significantly and so forth. So figuring out how to get into industry was not very easy to do. I wound up at North Dakota State University because of the information I had. They were the only university that had 2 railroads pulling out of them, both the Union Pacific and the Burlington Northern, versus all the others only seemed to have one. Showed up 3 days before classes started. Planned on being a transportation engineer, which is sort of a hybrid between industrial engineering and civil engineering, and off I went. My sophomore or junior year, they decided that they weren't going to have that program anymore and said, "You're all going to be civil engineers now." I didn't know what a civil engineer was, didn't know what they did. Some would argue I still don't. But by that time, I had found I was working as a student research assistant with the Upper Great Plains Transportation Institute, working on rail stuff. And so I stuck it out and wound up with an internship at the Burlington Northern, a couple other internships with some small short lines. Got invited to stay with the Burlington Northern, but was working. Had already decided to go and get my master's degree in logistics, in a logistics program that they were starting. So they said, "Okay, well, we're gonna kind of do this thing where we share you. You work for us, blah, 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 blah." Did that. Graduated before the program got approved. So they gave me another civil engineering degree, which just what I needed. And during that whole process, the Santa Fe merger occurred, and Burlington Northern decided they wanted Santa Fe more than me. And so that left me kind of wondering what to do. I did have a job offer from Union Pacific, but I wound up going to work on the consultant side with HDR. Moved around on the consultant side for 12 years, give or take, 95 to 2006, I guess 11. With HDR Trans Systems and Hanson Wilson. Wound up coming up to Alaska to work on getting a Hanson Wilson office established here to work for the Alaska Railroad. And after about a year, 15 months of doing that and working with the railroad said, "We think we'd rather have you work over here than pay you to work over there." And talked about it with the senior management at Hanson Wilson at the time, and they were supportive. So been there ever since.
So that was 2006. I'm sorry, just to
That was
break in here.
2006. Yes.
Okay, so you've been up there for a good 15 years, yeah?
Yes, I have. So,
And
AREMA. I believe I joined AREMA in 1988 or 1989 as a student member. I remember at the time there was like 17 student members. It was AREA at the time. And, I think for a lot of student members, it was a magazine and little more than that, and a little card that you got in the mail. But it wasn't until 95, I think, I went to my first AREA conference at the Palmer House. They held them in March at the time. Lovely time to be in Chicago. And really, I saw a couple people that I had worked with were there, so it was good to see them, and really sort of opened my eyes to all the stuff that AREMA could be. But I didn't know the secret sauce at the time. And the secret sauce was when I joined Committee 14 and Committee 24 around 1996, 97. And the exponential value that has had both in my learning about the railroad industry as well as just teaching me about railroading really happens at the committee level. I don't think anybody's getting any value or as much value as they could until they join those committees and really start getting them. And it's more than just joining, right? You need to be involved. And so did a lot of work with Committee 14 and 24 with the IPRE. That's the Introduction to Railway Engineering, as well as the Practical Guide to Railroad Engineering. Both those courses did a lot of work on some of the original intermodal design seminars with Committee 14. Did some manual development for Committee 14, particularly on the intermodal side. Did a lot of work on the intermodal side, now that I think about it.
Committee
And
14 is what committee? And Committee
yards and
24 is what
terminals.
committee? Okay.
Yards and terminals. And that's yards and terminals has always been an interest to me. From the onset, I've been on the engineering side for most of my railroading career. I really enjoy engineering, but when it boils down to it, I'm a process guy, right? When I was interning at Burlington Northern, I was actually in the operating department, and most of my time at the short lines was more on the operating side. Uh, you know, things like, I remember looking at a number of issues. We had just at Burlington Northern, we had just implemented the precision rail system. Or precision management system, excuse me, where the whole idea was the minute we got the way bill, that car would have a plan on what train it would be all the way to destination, and we would measure against how well we did that plan. And we had a lot of terminal soups that were used to, okay, all these cars, they are on the next train, all these cars on the next train, and getting them to say, okay, not that one and not that one and not that one, because it wasn't part of the plan. Took a lot of education, but I was spending a lot of time looking at yard dwell times, a lot of time looking at over the road performance, sometimes looking at, we had some crew resource issues where we had a lot of trains going one way. Well, the crews would get stuck and we'd have to drive them back, things like that. The process side was always very interesting to me. And so when you get into yards, particularly intermodal yards, a lot of it's process. I had the good fortune of working on BNSF's Memphis Intermodal Terminal, doing a lot of the pre-mem work. Moved up here in the middle of it, got finished off by some folks at Hanson Wilson. But the track design, as far as that yard goes, and a lot of intermodal yards is not super fancy, not super complicated. But when you look at the truck volumes and the property we had to work with and stuff like that, and the wide span crane designs does a lot as far as manipulating what boxes are available and stuff like that. It became obvious that it was more of a traffic problem on the truck side than it was anything else. And when you're paving an intermodal yard, you're paving for that square foot of pavement, whether you're driving on it or parking on it. And parking on it's got more value than driving on it. And so doing a lot of work with traffic models and applying that in an intermodal facility to try to maximize the parking space versus running space was very interesting for me.
Very cool. And I know we're going to talk all things Alaska Railroad here in a second, but I do want to just hit on really quickly Committee 24. You did mention
Yes.
that. What is Committee 24, and what do they do?
Committee 24 is education and training, and they do so much. They are sort of the liaisons to the university and the student chapters. They do a lot of education and training development, sort of outside some of the traditional committee structures. They've got a track alignment design class that they do. Uh, the Practical Guide to Railroad Engineering, really the first engineering book that was written soup to nuts and decades. They assembled and did a lot of the writing for. I did some of the writing for it, um, as well as doing a lot as far as the introduction of new members. The other thing that they do is they do some behind the scenes work on the development of seminars and webinars and stuff like that, as far as making sure that they're technically reviewed by the proper folks within AREMA. Um, so they really do a lot. They're frankly one of the hardest working committees I've ever seen.
Okay, fantastic. And from there, it sounds like you were chair of 14, going back to your intermodal yards and terminals, and
Yes.
then you kind of moved up through the AREMA ranks from there,
Hmm.
becoming the president back in 2015,
Yep.
16.
Yep.
Um, okay, fantastic. Well, I guess thank you for your service to AREMA, and you're obviously still busy with it. But you know what? Here's the thing: we're here to talk about Alaska Railroad. So
Sure.
let's just say you and I are at the Palmer House Hilton, and we get a nice long elevator ride. I guess what's your in a quick nutshell? Um, what's your overarching biggest issues in the winter with the Alaska Railroad? And then let's dive into some examples.
Well, as you can imagine, it generally boils around two things: cold and snow. And you know, it warms up the snow, so it'll give you a sense of what cold is. We have some fairly mountainous territory that we go through, that we have some significant avalanche work that needs to get done to maintain rail service through there. Uh, Sometimes we measure snow in feet and not inches on the south end of our railroad. Um, but likewise, we get cold. I mean, I'm happy that it's above zero. It's made it all the way up to 3 here in Anchorage for the first time in a couple days at least. It's a little cold early here, but it drops off. It's 20 below in Wasilla today, and 40 below or even colder than that is a normal winter temperature for half our railroad. And that affects a lot of things. It affects train traffic. We do, once it gets significantly cold, we've got a progressive scale. As it gets colder, our train lengths have to get shorter just to keep air through the system. Likewise, we start running cold weather patrols. Uh, you know, Rail, as you know, likes to expand and contract whether you allow it to or not. And so when you have rail temperatures of pushing 100 degrees in the summer, but they're 40 below in the winter, something's got to give. And so as part of our rail management plan, our CWR plan, when it starts to get cold, we start running patrols. Uh, you know, we get some interesting things that a lot of people don't think about when you have that much differential in temperature. When you have, for instance, fixed deck bridges off the end of curves, uh, our curves breathe, for lack of a better term. They'll slide in and out an inch or two or more. Well, if you got a fixed deck bridge off the end of that, your bridge wasn't designed to do that. And we've got 2 or 3 bridges right now. In one case, the bridge isn't that old, but we've got issues with it going out of class, and there's a lot of work on that abutment just because the track's trying to move and the bridge doesn't want to let it. And so we've got to do some different thinking about some of our bridge replacements.
So when people use the term movable bridge, that's probably not what they're referring to.
It's not moving in the way that we like it to. No. We'll let it move longitudinally. It's the lateral movement that we don't really design for. But there's things that we can do, just actually giving it a ballast deck versus a fixed deck so that it can work its way through the ballast and give it room to relieve the lateral pressure on those foundations. One of the things that we forget about if you dig into the AAR research, it takes about 2.5 seconds for a train to decide to go in whatever direction you're telling it to go. Just the way the vehicle dynamics work, you can take a train from a 2-degree curve, run it through a spiral, and get it to go straight again. But it's about 2.5 seconds before the train actually decides it's going to go straight again. So you do get a lot of lateral movement back and forth on bridges off the end of curves, which is one of the reasons why we like to give it a little bit more space. But sometimes terrain doesn't allow you to do that. And so that's why, within AREMA, we've got lateral design guidelines that are used to take that into account. But, when the track's not helping you, sometimes you go outside that envelope.
Well, let's take a quick step back here in case anybody that's listening hasn't quite figured it out. Brian is the chief engineer at Alaska Railroad, and you just threw out a lot of terms that I want to make sure we get covered here. You talked about continually CWR or continuously welded rail. You talked about degree of curvature in the tracks. You talked about ballast deck, open deck. Let's take maybe just take it from the top here from some fun facts territory. How long is the Alaska Railroad? How many bridges does it have roughly? Tunnels? Maybe kind of give a listener that's never ever been there or knows nothing about it. How would you describe your overall system?
Well, we describe ourselves as the last full-service railroad in the country. We run both passengers and freight. Passengers are obviously heavier in the summer when it's nice to be here, but we do a lot of freight work, particularly supporting oil development on the north side of Alaska, as well as all the industries in between. We have 575 miles of mainline track, basically between Seward and Fairbanks. We've got some additional branch lines beyond that. We have 5 tunnels, I think. 6. We have 6 tunnels left. I wish it was 5. But some of those tunnels are fairly long. The Whittier Tunnel's 3.5 miles. Actually shares that tunnel with roadway traffic, fairly unique. We've got between 160 and 170 bridges, depending on how you count them. Of those, probably more than half of those are steel. Probably about 25% are concrete. The remainder are timber. We actually operate 3 port facilities, one in Seattle, one in Whittier, one in Seward, because we float interchange traffic back and forth between UP and BNSF, between Whittier and Seattle. That barge is once a week. Sometimes we'll throw extras on if traffic gets too heavy. Other than that, it's a railroad. We've got the south end of our railroad we've got 3% grades, 14-degree curves on the main line, and it's literally off the end of glaciers with some tunnels. Probably one of the most beautiful parts of any railroad ride you're going to find anywhere. But it takes a lot of work to keep it going. Northern half of the railroad, we've got a lot of discontinuous permafrost. Which can make roadbed maintenance a challenge as it freezes and thaws. But it also represents challenges when we've got a bridge up there right now that the permafrost is melted underneath the foundation. We're getting ready to replace it, not because the bridge needs to be replaced, but the foundations have basically rotted out underneath of it. So
Interesting.
Yeah.
So I've had the luck. I was very lucky to have the opportunity to ride your railroad on the south end. One time, I think it was 2017 or 18 at this point. And as a fan of backcountry skiing myself and the mountains, and I have a teeny bit of avalanche experience. So, what do you guys do in that south end of the railroad to keep those tracks clear? Because I saw on that railroad ride, I saw some pretty steep slopes and definitely some failure mechanisms and chutes along the way. So are there? I'm assuming this, but are there howitzers that are along the way, are you guys have skiers dropping bombs, or is it all the above?
It's a bit of all the above. We maintain what we call slide zones, which are those avalanche chutes. We actually have our own avalanche expert on staff, and he's a resource not only for us, but he does a lot of work with the DOT as well. Matt McGee is his name, and we have howitzers that will go and shoot, but that program is coming to an end here in the next 10 to 12 years. The military is just not going to continue to support it. We also have remote detonation on a couple of those avalanche slopes, where in the summertime we'll go up there and put the charges in the boxes, and literally he can stand on his deck with his iPhone and set them off. But we have five different alert levels on those avalanche zones. This time of year, they're loading up, but they haven't really let go yet. We've got a lot of safety precautions in place as far as traveling through those areas in a vehicle, stuff like that. We've got the little beacons and so forth for anyone going through them. We've got a lot of precautions for when we're doing work in those areas. Most of the slide zones we will try to bring down once or twice a year once they start to accumulate versus letting them come down naturally. And it we got a lot of science. We've got one that we have lasers on. It's more of a slow moving slide, sort of a sheet. So we've got lasers on it. So once it starts to move, we'll catch it and we'll be able to go get in front of it. But some of those zones, we've got one of the big ones down at 52. We've got a 70-foot hole next to the track that it lands in, and sometimes it fills the hole. Sometimes we'll have 80 feet of snow over the track after it fills the hole.
Oh, wow.
And it depends on the year.
Yeah, and obviously every year's different, and how the snow builds. And the saying out here, obviously, is October snow is the worst snow for Colorado, because it oftentimes warms up, and then we get a bad base layer, and now you've got basically ball bearings sitting at the interface between a heavy load and a pretty steep slope. And so I'm sure that all that goes into Matt's thinkings as he goes through and determines where to drop bombs. I assume that your safety briefings must be different for those that are running around in high rails. I'm just going to come right out and ask you. I mean, have the trains and or high rails been caught in an active slide, or have they just been there a post slide, if you will?
We've got a sighting named Brookman after Terry Brookman. Slide had come down, and I want to say it was 98 or 99. It's about 20 years ago now. And that's a shared corridor we have with DOT, and they were cleaning it up. But it was it's called Five Fingers because it's got 5 different chutes coming into one area, and they hadn't all come down. And Mr. Brookman wound up 300 feet out into the Turnagain Arm, and it's not always a good thing when they name a sighting after you. Let's just put it that way.
Was he in a vehicle?
He was in a dozer clearing the snow.
Oh man.
Yeah.
Okay.
But we also, I want to say in 2005, we had a train hit by an avalanche up at 49. Don't really know the backstory about why the train was there and the snow was there at the same time, but it took us a while to get that cleaned up. And we, as a result of that, I think I've gone back and cleaned up a lot of the pre-clearances and the pre-checks that we've done that we do prior to those. But since then, I think we're pretty proactive. We will try to bring things down slowly in a controlled fashion versus letting them come down on their own.
Sure.
And most of the time, you'll always get some stuff that comes down unexpectedly, but if we are able to control the volume that's available to come down, then generally the mitigation is less.
So based on the different levels, you may or may not choose to have train traffic at that time.
Yep.
It may go at a different speed. It may go at a different length or of consist. Does that sound right? Or
Well, there's times where we just won't go, right?
sure,
And
sure.
there's things that we won't do. We won't be working an active slide zone in the dark, which, given where we are in the solar trajectory, that means that, and we may only have a few hours to work on it during the day, and if we don't get it to where we're satisfied, the train doesn't go.
Okay,
That's the bottom
that makes
line.
sense.
Likewise, there's times of day, you don't want to as that sun sits there and cooks the snow in the afternoon, well, maybe going, just as the sun's going down, maybe not be the best time to go. Maybe you want to go earlier. And that's where Maintenance Away and our avalanche experts get together and work directly with operations, trying to make sure all of that's coordinated.
Okay, yeah, that makes sense. And so, let me just as I'm processing this, so I guess would you say that avalanches on the south end of your road are a bigger issue or smaller issue than, can I use the term sun kink, or whatever, however you'd like to describe CWR
Thermal
buckling?
thermal deviations.
Thermal deviations of the rail. Yes, that's
Yeah.
very engineering.
Um, I'm not going to necessarily say one's worse than the others, because in all cases, if you plan for it and you mitigate for it, and you've got the right people watching it, there are issues that you can um, mitigate before there's any significant danger to the passing of trains. Um, you know, we don't get the sort of thermal variations on the top end that you'll get maybe in, I don't know, Arizona or Nebraska or something like that. We spend a lot more effort, I believe, on, well, it's kind of difficult to say, because when you're talking about sun kinks, you're talking about basically managing the neutral temperature of the rail, and we do spend a lot of time doing on that. But you're working both ends, right? You're working the top end as well as the low end. When you're dealing with avalanches, you're only dealing with one end of it, and we do
True.
spend a lot of resources on the avalanche side. Is it fair to say that we spend more on that than we do on managing neutral temperature rail? Probably not.
Sure. Now, on the north end of your road, I do know, from some of the stories I heard from the conductors when I rode it, there's quite a few people that rely on your railroad during the winter to get supplies and goods, people that live off grid.
Mhm.
So I'm assuming that there's no section of the railroad that's ever really shut down, um, like seasonality wise, right?
That's correct.
Okay.
The You're talking about, we run the last whistle stop in the country, particularly north of Talkeetna. There are a lot of, they're off the road system up there, and their only way in and out's by the rail. And yeah, we haul their stuff, we haul their chickens, we haul their food, their propane, all of it. They got to lug it in and out on us. And that's a service that we've always provided and continue to do. The Forest Service in the summertime, down on the south end, has a similar system, sort of a whistle stop. They've got predetermined stops, so you can go backcountry adventuring up in those mountains. Walk across a glacier if you want to, feed the bears, whatever you want to do. Um, that's generally more summertime, but generally the railroad is open and available. There are times in the wintertime when traffic on the south end gets a little light, and we'll keep it warm in so much as, we have the ability to open it up in a day's notice if we have to, or two. But it's not necessarily maintained for traffic every day.
Oh, okay. Did not know that. And then you did talk a little bit about permafrost. That's a
Mm-hmm.
term that you don't use in the continental U.S. So at least I don't believe we do.
Mm-hmm.
Maybe you could tell the listeners a little bit about what that is and how it's eradicated by you guys.
Well, permafrost is a term for soil that's basically frozen for more than 1 year at a time. As you go farther north, you don't get um, enough degree days, if you will, or warmth to basically keep the soil thawed. That permafrost um, So basically, you're dealing with a frozen soil mass. If it's gravel, that's nice because the freezing of the water, it's got somewhere to go. But when you're dealing with silts and clays, you get a lot of thermal expansion as it melts or freezes. And it's the discontinuous piece of that that's the problem, because seasonally it'll swell and shrink and swell and shrink. Um, there's not a lot that can be done short of significant, very expensive subgrade replacements. And when you have permafrost going down 50, 60, 70 feet, you're not going to find the bottom of it. And so things that we do, or things that were done when the railroad was constructed, one of the things that with permafrost, you can only do two things. You can get rid of it or you can try to keep it frozen. And it turns out the foliage that grows naturally through a lot of the north end of the railroad, the scrub, mossy type stuff, does a fairly good job of insulating it. And the first thing we did when we built the railroad 100 years ago is we scraped all that crap off, and then we put nice rock, dark, ties, steel, and stuff like that. Well, that just sucks the heat in, and so you get a much worse effect as far as melting it. If you do things like dry piles into it, those piles just suck the heat and take it down, and so you wind up with these thaw bulbs around the pile where the pile's still there, but rather than having any decent lateral support, it's just sitting in liquid mud. Um, and so we need to design around those sorts of things.
Yeah, that's you're talking to a bridge guy.
Mhm.
So that tickles my fancy here of what type of foundations are they all driven pile foundations? Are you pouring concrete? What how are you supporting a structure in and around permafrost?
Well, we've got one bridge that actually has thermosiphons on it. Um, yeah, that is a technology that was developed basically around the Alaska pipeline because they had to build a pipeline through all this stuff. And you have a tube with pressurized refrigerant in it, and fins. And what it does is it passively keeps frozen soil frozen, or attempts to. The only other thing that you can do is, yeah, you drive piles through it, but you drive piles through it and design your foundation around the fact that it's not going to have lateral support until it's fairly deep. Um, and that's
So
really your
basically, no, there's no, you can't really count on skin friction of the pile
correct.
because
It's
it's
all
in
end
essence,
bearing.
yeah, it's all end bearing. Okay. All right. Well, you know what we're going to do? We're going to reel myself way off that cliff of, of bridge talk, and we're going to come right back to where we started. So, last couple of questions I have. I could go on for hours talking about this stuff, but anything interesting as it relates to? You talked about temperature. You talked about some pretty significant cold temps. We've covered avalanches. We've definitely talked about permafrost. How about how's the track switches? And I know people have seen every winter when I was in New York, they always would show pictures of of the switches and the guy out there with a blowtorch.
Mm-hmm.
Um, is there anything special you guys do or do differently to keep sidings open and yards open?
Uh, Not particularly, other than, when it gets to winter prep, we need to make sure that our snow storage areas are clear. That's one of the areas that, we have to take into account when we're looking at changes to our yards and our terminal facilities and stuff like that, is we're going to be shoveling a lot of snow. Where's it going to go? At some point, you may have to haul it out. And that's what we have air dumps for, and then we'll go take it somewhere else. But that's an expensive operation that we'd like to avoid if we could. But when it comes to switches, it's backpack blowers, ice picks, shovels, just, good old fashioned 1900s technology. Um,
Sure.
and we do a lot of work with that. As long, but you did mention something about bridges, and one thing that we do that's fairly unique, that honestly, if we could do this anywhere, you'd do it, is building bridges off of ice is amazingly simple. If you can count on a couple months of ice, driving cranes out onto ice and working off the ice versus off of barges or trying to do everything off the shore, yeah, maybe 25 below, but you can mitigate for that. The convenience of being able to build cribbing on rivers that are frozen, slide stuff out, work off of it. It it really gives us the ability to work on parts of our railroad that we wouldn't have the windows and the availability to do it in the summertime. So
Yeah, because we
summertime's for
would
track
call,
work.
and yeah, we'd call that a float in, float out down here, and I guess that would be a slide in, slide out for you guys. I didn't even
Yeah,
think about that. That's pretty
yeah.
cool. Well, I'll tell you one thing. We're gonna have to finish this, wrap this up, and I think it's a little weird that we have not even talked about snowblowers. You guys have got to have some amazing snow removal equipment for these trains that come across just your standard 1 or 2 foot dump.
We don't, to be honest with you.
All right.
I would say the backbone of our snow maintenance fleet, at least on the track side, is actually ballast regulators. We
Okay.
set those up, and they are the 1 to 2 footers, things like that. They are the backbone. We have Once you get beyond that, we have what we call a snow fleet, traditional Jordan spreader and a bunch of yellow metal. Um, and that spreader can push out 25 feet, give or take, with full wing. But you do have to go back in, with avalanches and stuff like that. That's got a bunch of trees in it and everything else. That's really more of a yellow metal show, traditional bulldozers and excavators and so forth. But that has to be maintained. You can only shove out a few times before you're going to have to go out to that 25 feet and start again with Caterpillar type equipment, working that stack back, so the next time you run through, you got somewhere for that snow to go. So it's a constant maintenance operation pretty much through the winter. It's not just clearing the track, but then making sure the next time you have to clear the track, there's somewhere for the snow to go.
Yeah, it sounds like that might be how we wrap this up. It sounds like a constant maintenance operation year round, with all the movement. I think the word I keep hearing is movement of gauge and of track gauge, of in curves, of things thawing and freezing, and uh, basically living and breathing
Mm-hmm.
more than the average railroad potentially. So, well, Brian, thank you for coming on. I really appreciate your time. I know everyone, all of our listeners do as well. I wish you the absolute best upcoming holiday season. And frankly, I really look forward to shaking your hand come Denver next August.
I think we're all looking forward to getting back together again, and I think Denver's a great place to do it.
Outstanding. All right. Well, we'll talk to you soon.
All right. Thank you very much.
Thank you for rolling with AREMA on today's episode of Platform Chats. For further information about AREMA, please visit arema.org or contact us at info@arema.org.